Hello everyone, welcome back to Read Along Saturday, and today we are continuing with The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. Let's move on to chapter number 17 concerning cruelty and clemency and whether it is better to be loved than feared. Coming now to the other qualities mentioned above, I say that every prince ought to desire to be considered clement and not cruel. Nevertheless, he ought to take care not to misuse this clemency. Cesare Borgia was considered cruel, notwithstandingly. His cruelty reconciled the Romagna, ununified it, and restored it to peace and loyalty. And if this is rightly considered, he will be seen to have been much more merciful than Florentine people, who, to avoid a reputation of cruelty, permitted Pistoia to be destroyed. Therefore, a prince, so long as he keeps his subjects united and loyal, ought not to mind the reproach of cruelty, because with a few extra examples, he will be more merciful than those who, through too much mercy, allow disorder to arise, from which follow murders or robberies, for these are wont to injure the whole people, whilst those executions which originate with the prince offend the individual only. And of all princes, it is impossible for the new prince to avoid the imputation of cruelty, owing to the new states being full of dangers. Hence, Virgil, through the mouth of Dido, excuses the inhumanity of her reign owing to its being new, saying, Res dura et regni novitas mitalia cocant, moliri et lete fans custode tuveri. Against my will, my fate, a throne unsettled and an infant state, bid me defend my realms with all my powers, and guard with these severities my shores. It was said by Christopher Pitt. Nevertheless, he ought to be slow to believe and to act, nor should he himself show fear, but proceed in a temperate manner with the prudence and humanity, so that too much confidence may not be him incautious, and too much distrust render him intolerable. Upon this, a question arises whether it is to be better to be loved than feared, or fear than loved. It may be answered that one should wish to be both. But because it is difficult to unite them in one person, it is much safer to be feared than loved, when of the two either must be dispensed with. Because this is to be asserted in general of men, that they are ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, covetous, and as long as you succeed, they are yours entirely. They will offer you their blood, property, life, and children, as is said above, when the need is far distant. But when it approaches, they turn against you. And that prince who, relying entirely on their promises, has neglected other precautions is ruined. Because friendships that are obtained by payments, not by greatness or nobility of mind, may indeed be earned, but they are not secured, and in time of need cannot be relied upon. And men have less scruple in offending one who is beloved than one who is feared. For love is preserved by the link of obligation, which, owing to the baseness of men, is broken at every opportunity for their advantage. But fear perseveres you by the dread of punishment, which never fails. Nevertheless, a prince ought to inspire fear in such a way that if he does not win love, he avoids hatred, because he can endure very well being feared whilst he is not hated, which will always be as long as he abstains from the property of his citizens and subjects and from their women. But when it is necessary for him to proceed against the life of someone, he must do it in proper justification and for manifest cause. But above all things, he must keep his hands off the property of others, because men more quickly forget the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony. Besides, the pretexts for taking away the property are never wanting, for he who has once begun to live by robbery will always find pretexts for seizing what belongs to others, but reasons for taking life, on the contrary, are more difficult to find and sooner lapse. But when a prince is with his army and has under control a multitude of soldiers, then it is quite necessary for him to disregard the reputation of cruelty, for without it he would never hold this army united and disposed to its duties. Among the wonderful deeds of Hannibal, this one is enumerated, that having led to an enormous army composed of many various races of men to fight in foreign lands, no dissensions arose either among them or against the prince, whether in his bad or in his good fortune. This arose from nothing else than an inhuman cruelty, which, with his boundless valor, made him revered and terrible in sight of his soldiers. But without the cruelty, these other virtues were not sufficient to produce this effect. And short sighted writers admire his deeds from one point of view and from others condemn the principal cause of them. That is true, his other virtues would not have been sufficient for him, may be proved by the case of Scipio, that most excellent man, not only of his own times but within the memory of man, against whom nevertheless his army rebelled in Spain. This arose from nothing but his too great forbearance, which gave his soldiers more license than inconsistent with military discipline. For this he was upbraided in Senate by Fabius Maximus and called the corrupter of the Roman soldiery. The Lucarians were laid waste by the legate of Scipio, yet they were not avenged by him, nor was the insolence of the legate punished, owing entirely to his easy nature, insomuch that someone in the Senate, wishing to excuse him, said there were many men who knew much better how not to err them to correct the errors of others. This disposition, if he had been continued in the command, would have destroyed in time the fame and glory of Scipio. But he being under control of Senate, this injurious characteristic not only concealed itself but contributed to his glory. Returning to the question of being feared or loved, I come to the conclusion that men loving according to their own will and fearing according to that of the prince, a wise prince should establish himself on that which is his own control and not in that of others. He must be endeavor only to avoid hatred, as is noted. So, moving on to the explanation for chapter number 17, a very important and big question which is applicable today as well. Which is better for a prince or anyone in a leadership position, to be loved or to be feared? Well, love is fickle. Love is born by obligation that men, being selfish, will break as it suits their interest. Fear is reliable. Fear is maintained by dread of punishment, which never fails. Men are less apt to offend one whom they fear. Men are generally ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly. While they are yours, they will offer everything to you. But when danger approaches, they will turn away and run. But remembering this is that they must fear you, they must not hate you. So you have to avoid hatred. Do not touch the property of your subject, do not touch their women. Men forget the death of a father more quickly than the loss of patrimony, right? Chapter number 18, concerning the way in which princes should keep faith. Everyone admits how praiseworthy it is in a prince to keep faith and to live with integrity and not with craft. Nevertheless, our experience has been that those princes who have done great things have held good faith in little account and have known how to circumvent the intellect of men by craft, and the end have overcome those who have relied on their word. You must know there are two ways of contesting, the one by the law, the other by force. The first method is to proper the men, the second to beasts. But because the first is frequently not sufficient, it is necessary to have resource to the second. Therefore, it is necessary for a prince to understand how to avail himself of the beast and the man. This has been figuratively taught but to princes by ancient writers who describe how Achilles and many other princes of old were given to the centaur Chiron to nurse, who brought them up in his discipline, which means solely that, as they had for a teacher one who had half beast and half man, so it is necessary for a prince to know how to make use of both natures, and that one without the other not durable. A prince, therefore, being compelled knowingly to adopt the beast, or to choose the fox and the lion, because the lion cannot defend himself against snares, and the fox cannot defend himself against the wolves. Therefore, it is necessary to be a fox to discover the snares, and a lion to terrify the wolves. Those who rely simply on a lion do not understand what they are about. Therefore, a wise lord cannot, or not ought to he, keep faith when such observance may be turned against him. And when the reasons that caused him to pledge is to exist no longer, if men were entirely good, their percept would not hold. But because they are bad and will not keep faith with you, you too not bound to observe it with them. Nor will there ever be wanting to a prince legitimate reasons to excuse this non-observance. Of this, endless modern examples could be given, showing how many treaties and engagements have been made void and of no effect through faithlessness of prince, and he who has known best how to employ the fox has succeeded best. But it is necessary to know well how to disguise this characteristic and to be great pretender and dissembler. And men are so simple and so subject to present necessities that he who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived. One recent example I cannot pass over in silence. Alexander the Sixth did nothing else but deceive men, nor ever thought of doing otherwise, and he always found victims, for there never was a man who had greater power in asserting, or who with great oaths would affirm a thing, yet would observe it less. Nevertheless, his deceits always succeeded according to his wishes, because he well understood this side of mankind. Therefore, it is unnecessary for a prince to have all the good qualities I have enumerated, but it is very necessary to appear to have them. And I shall dare to say this also, that to have them and always to observe them is injurious, and that to appear to have them is useful. To appear merciful, faithful, humane, religious, upright, and to be so, but with a mind so framed that should require not to be so, you may be able to know how to change to the opposite. And you have to understand this, that a prince, especially a new one, cannot observe all those things for which men are esteemed, being often forced in order to maintain the state, to act contrary to fidelity, friendship, humanity, and religion. Therefore, it is necessary for him to have a mind ready to turn himself accordingly as the winds and variations of fortune force it. Yet, as I have said above, not to diverge from the good, he can avoid doing so. But if compelled, then he know how to set about it. For this reason, a prince ought to take care that he never lets anything slip from his lips that is not replete with the above named 5 qualities, that he may appear him who sees and hears him altogether merciful, faithful, humane, upright, and religious. There is nothing more necessary to appear to have than this last quality, inasmuch as men judge generally more by eye than by hand, because it belongs to everybody to see you, to few to come in touch with you. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few really know what you are, and those few dare not oppose themselves to the opinion of the many, who have the majesty of the state to defend them, and in the action of all men, and especially the princes, which is not prudent to challenge, one judges by the result. For that reason, let a prince have the credit of conquering and holding his state. The means will always be considered honest, and he will be praised by everybody, because the vulgar are always taken by what a thing seems to be and by what comes of it. And in the world there is only vulgar, for few find a place there only when the many have no ground to rest on. One prince of the present time, whom it is not well to name, never preaches anything else but peace and good faith, and to both he most hostile, and either, if he had kept it, would have deprived him of the reputation and kingdom many a time. That was chapter number 18, and I think it gives a very big lesson to us. Let me discuss this. Now, the biggest question is, can a prince keep his word, or he can deceive you? Well, Machiavelli answers it quite clearly. A wise prince should not keep his word when doing so would be disadvantageous, and when reasons for his promise no longer exist. two ways of contending is by law, the way of men, and by force, the way of beasts. A prince must learn to use both. He must be a lion to frighten the wolves and a fox to frighten the snares, traps, and deceit, right? He must use law when he can and force when he must. A purely lion like prince falls into traps. A purely fox like prince cannot defend against enemies. So, a prince does not need to possess all the good qualities, but he must appear to possess. It is beneficial to be religious, truthful, honest, have integrity, be merciful, you be humane, because people judge by their eyes more than by their hands, because everybody is watching you. It is very easy to look at you and judge you, and if you appear to be merciful and full of humanity and honest, they will trust you, right? Because only very few can reach the top leadership, and they will know the truth, but they will not, they will not bear to go against the majority, right? So yeah, was it gives you a very important lesson if you take it, right? Okay, that was it for today. I will see you next week with the next chapters, and until then, keep reading and keep watching.